Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Flaherty X Boulder program. This is the first virtual Q&A from the Unwriting of Disaster program, and we are super excited to have Renée Green and Patty Chang join us. Thank you both. Welcome. I will read a quick bio for each of them, and then we'll probably just jump right into discussing some of elements of the work that we're super excited about. And just a reminder, if you are interested to drop your comments or questions, you can, if you're streaming from YouTube, you can just write into the comment section of the YouTube or Facebook channels, and we'll pick up on those and probably pick on the elements of those later on in the question and answer section. But yeah, welcome Renée, welcome Patty. Renée Green is an artist, filmmaker, and writer. Via films, essays, and writings, installations, digital media, architecture, sound-related works, film series, and events, her work engages with investigations into circuits of relation and exchanges over time, the gaps and shifts in what survives in public and private memories, as well as what has been imagined and invented. She also focuses on the effects of a changing transcultural sphere on what can now be made and thought. Green has had solo exhibitions at the Museum of Modern Art, New York, the MAK Center for Art and Architecture at the Schindler House, Los Angeles, Lumiere Cité, Lisbon, Gallery Nagel Draxler in Berlin, Fonzioni Antonio Ratti, Como in Italy, Prefix Institute for Contemporary Art in Toronto, and the Carpenter Center for Visual Arts at Harvard University, Cambridge, Massachusetts, among many others. Green is currently a professor at MIT's program in Art, Culture, and Technology. Her books include Other Planes of There, Selected Writings from 2014, Endless Dreams and Time-Based Streams in 2010, Ongoing Becomings, among many other books as well. Green has also published essays and fictions in Transition, October, Freeze, Textkunst, Specs, Multitudes, Sarai Reader, and Collapse, among other magazines and journals. Her essays, as well as essays about her work, have also appeared in an assortment of international, cultural, and scholarly books. Thank you, Renée. That's number one. Patty Chang is an artist working in performance, video, writing, and installation. Her work has a capacity to explore complex subjects nearly simultaneously, as does life. Born in 1972 in San Leandro, California, Chang received her BA from the University of California, San Diego in 1994. Her work has been exhibited nationwide and internationally at such institutions as the Museum of Modern Art, New York, Solomon R. Guggenheim Museum, New York, New Museum, New York, the BAK, Basis voor Actuele Kunst in Utrecht in the Netherlands, the Hammer Museum, Los Angeles, Frei Art Center, the Freiburg in Freiburg, Switzerland, Chinese Arts Center, Manchester, England, the Museum of Contemporary Art, Chicago, the M+ Museum, Hong Kong, the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, and the Moderna Museet, Stockholm. Her work has received a 2003 award from the Rockefeller Foundation and a 2012 Creative Capital Award. In 2008, she was a finalist for the Hugo Boss Prize and a Gunnar S. Mundheim Fellow in the Visual Arts at the American Academy in Berlin. In 2014, Chang was a John Simon Guggenheim Memorial Foundation Fellow. Her acclaimed exhibition, Patty Chang, The Wandering Lake, 2009 to 2017, will travel to the Institute of Contemporary Art, Los Angeles in 2019, which I hope it made it there.
That's a little bit old.
I hope it made it there. She lives and works in Los Angeles. Thank you both so much for joining us, and apologies if I pronounced any of those amazing accreditations incorrectly. But I just wanted to say quickly, how are y'all? How are you doing right now?
Doing pretty well.
All right.
Yeah, hanging in there.
Hanging in there. How about you, Patty?
I'm doing pretty well. It's 100 degrees here, and there was a fire behind, like nearby, yesterday. So.
And are you in LA right now?
Yeah, I live in LA now.
You're in LA, and
Yeah.
Renée, are you in Cambridge right now?
Yeah, I'm in Somerville,
Massachusetts. Yeah.
Haven't left the place. End of January.
Well, thank you all for this amazing program, and it's interesting to have both of your works, side by side in the program, which is not the case with everyone's works. But it's really interesting to see kind of some overlaps, some unexpected overlaps, I think, within the works. And the first question I wanted to ask is surrounding the question of burial and the way that burial functions in both of your pieces. For Renee, in the film Partially Buried, there's the Smithson piece, which, as the name suggests, was only partially buried and turned into a memorial after the Kent State Massacre. And then eventually, it was removed completely. And for Patty, there is the unseen waterbed, if I understand it correctly, that's buried under layers of earth and grass, leaving room for, the instability of the surface, a destabilized surface, an unstable surface. So how do each of you view these layers of burial and disturbance and resurfacing within each of your works? And Patty, we'll start with you, and we'll go to Renee.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me, and I'm just so honored to be showing this piece with such a seminal work of yours. So that's really exciting for me. Well, I like these terms that you used, and I related them both to water, since there is a waterbed below the surface. So for burial, thinking about a submerge or submerging, a placing below the surface of water, and how the body is constantly submerging and resurfacing. And I also thought that this term resurfacing was kind of interesting in how it sort of presents this paradoxical image, maybe to reemerge or break through the surface, but also this idea that resurfacing could be to cover with a new surface, to make new again. So there, as if there's nothing underneath, or there was there before, sort of like a type of erasure. So more specifically, in my piece, the location of the waterbed in the performance is in a suburban backyard. It's in New Jersey, where I shot it. So I was thinking about suburbs as spaces of erasure, of history, location, identity, and sort of this whitewashing in terms of culture indifference. And also, I guess, the waterbed is in the ground. So in some ways, the burial becomes like a grave or returning to the earth.
And Renee, do you have any responses to that as well? Because there's some words that Patty touched on that I think are really interesting. The erasure, potentially, yeah.
Yes, I found there were different. Thanks again for inviting me. I'm glad to be here. Glad to meet Patty finally after a long time. And yes, I was thinking that there were surprising resonances. I was, and so I've been fascinated by the way that the composing of the festival has been organized. It's been really interesting for me, and so I've been learning things. But yes, I think in terms of burial, it's funny. I mean, the title literally is Partially Buried, and I have to say that also it's to be continued at the end of the film, and there's another part which is called Partially Buried Continued, and many other parts. But in terms of thinking about burial in this part of it, yes, the most obvious reference is the Smithson, the partially buried woodshed, and then the story about how that actually came into existence. How it came to be buried, and then also to actually disappear more or less, almost into the land, is described or is relayed in this film. But I was thinking in terms of the way that certain parts of the films are shot. And what you see in the frame. And so I like very much this kind of like unknown movement that's going on with the grass and also seeing this very kind of idyllic background, and it's a suburban, like little details of the suburban backyard, like a deck in a corner. I like that, and I was thinking about this in relation to also when I rewatched Partially Buried, and there's a section where there's also a kind of wobbling through green grass and trees, which was shot at Kent State. And this idea of like, no people are actually in the image, but it's the site where there had been students who had been fleeing being shot and during that time. And so I was thinking about that. And I mean, in terms of burial, I think it's kind of, it's sort of fluid, strangely, to think about the way that can take place, especially as time passes. And so the way things do become submerged, and how people don't, there's so many details and aspects people don't remember. And that's part of what the making of that film also entailed, me going there with my parents and trying to, and asking them, I mean, this is not in the film, but as I was watching it now, I was remembering what it was like to shoot there on different occasions, one of them with them, of my parents. And so, and how they could not remember, there was nothing they could remember very precisely. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that it's a kind of recurring theme in the work and the ways that it takes place. And water also is something, I mean, in my work also, it's very recurrent, submerging. Even in this film, water is also apparent with the jellyfish. So yeah, burial is definitely an aspect.
Yeah, absolutely. Burial and resurfacing too. I keep coming back to that term in terms of the way in which your work addresses time, and one interpretation that we might be able to look at Patty's film as well, in the kind of the unstable nature of time and the way in which things reoccur, right? I'm thinking of the soldiers and, you know, the students, and I'm thinking of the protests, and I'm thinking of erasure, as all these things were said. So, you know, I wanted to also think about, in relationship to time and resurfacing, how the body and land and the body are related in these works, and specifically how the body and the land both shift over time, and how certain destructive properties of this world seek to shape and shift the body in various ways. And of course, the body also has agency. So there are properties of this world that affect the body, but that we also affect the world as well. So with Patty's film, we have the body that's affecting the surface, but the surface is also affecting the body. Could you both speak about the way in which the connection between the body and land and time, and of course memory as well, plays out in your works? And Patty, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we usually think of land as being something that's fixed, and the body moves upon it. But in this video, the land is moved by my actual body, and the body is then, after that, moved by the land. And in that sort of cyclical way where it's like one thing moves into the next thing, and, you know, it sort of ripples. And then in between that, there's the camera, which is sitting on the waterbed. And the camera sort of acts as the prosthetic that then mediates that entire experience, this sort of laboring between the body moving the land, and then the land then again moving my body. So, and again, you know, I was thinking about water, and I've been reading this book by Astrid and Niemans, Astrida Nimanis, and she has this theory of hydrologics and questions about what it means to be like a body of water, and in this way, how all bodies of water relate to each other and also to the earth. So in some way, like the body is this sack filled with water, as well as the land is also this sack filled with water, the waterbed, which is a vinyl sack. So in this way, the body and land are both made of the same unstable elements. And the performance is this embodied act between them. And I think, my early performances were much more about the body in action and thinking through the body.
Yeah, thank you for that. Renee, I'm also thinking, you mentioned that there's not really many figures in this film besides yourself, and then one other person you interview. And so I was wondering what you think about in relationship to body and.
Yeah, I hadn't actually been asked that before. And so thanks for asking, because it's kind of forced me to look at aspects that I hadn't been thinking about in that way, between the body and the land. So the body is, I would say, well, it's literally my body, me as the persona who's moving through, as this character in the film. And even from the beginning of it, and then recurring at different moments, and also literally touching the ground through walking, striding through. There are different moments of actually trying to investigate the land and like going through this kind of overgrowth that is where the site is meant to still be, trying to locate it, seeing the traces of it. There's that. And then also actually touching a number of different things on the surfaces of the land while moving through and examining. So for example, touching material that you don't know exactly what that is outside of some buildings at Kent State, as well as like walking along the grass toward something that appears to be some form of a monument. And there are different ones that are represented in the film. And it's sort of like trying to figure out, well, what are these monuments and what do they relate to? And so there's a kind of quizzical, there's an investigative body. There's a body that's wandering through the space and sort of not really sure, but kind of like tactilely or viscerally moving around. And so then you have that, and in addition to this, what I was mentioning before with the camera and this kind of movement through. It's sort of more abstract movement through the trees and the grass. And so I think that, yeah, I mean, in terms of how that's been functioning my work, it varies in different works. And this one, I think, was really the first one. And I made other works that were moving image works, but before import-export funk office work with many other people, interviewing them and talking with them in different kinds of spaces. But this one was the first one that I made in which it was focusing on, I'm using my body in it, and I'm probing things that are in relation to my history and location, the place in Ohio, near where I was born. So yeah, the body and the land, they are, I mean, as you mentioned it, I had to think about it, and I think that there's a definite relationship between the body that I'm using, and the land.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, you have your fingers, paging through the different books and images and other bodies that are represented on screen. So I see like lots of layers of that. I mean, I think about the bodies of the students. I think about, Robert Smithson's body, right? How that ended. And I think about also, so there's this deep element of time within your work that I also like.
Yeah, you know what I realized as I was describing that and then listening to you saying these things is that there actually are quite a few bodies in the film. It's just that the bodies are mediated. And so you have bodies that are, there's some clips that are from the Nicholas Roeg film performance. You have these bodies and faces. You have different images of people. You have a lot of images of people on album covers, disintegrating album covers. You have Karen Carpenter. You have all of these different people who may or may not be recognized. Depending on what you know. But there are actually quite a lot of bodies and people present, but not as actors physically moving necessarily.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to touch on, I mean, both of you are filmmakers in a very broad spectrum of that term because, Renée, this was one of your early works, and you've continued to work in the moving image. Like you said, that this work was also, it's important to situate it in terms of the installation that it was a part of originally, correct? Mm-hmm. And then Patty, this Losing Ground is also kind of in a continuum of your more performative works, but you have since also expanded significantly outwardly with a focus on the moving image and the many ways that the camera could be used. So I was wondering if you could both talk about how your process in terms of filmmakers, how that's grown and what your engagement with the moving image is. Patty, we'll once again start with you.
Yeah, I mean, this, like you said, this is one of my earlier performance-based works. And, at some point I sort of shifted away from using myself, kind of as the main instigator or body that's, moving through the screen. And I mean, I thought it was actually really interesting when they chose to, show this video at Flaherty because it's mainly known as a experimental documentary space. And, but then thinking, I guess, about the performance as a document, and then sort of the works that I started making that engaged more with documentary and experimental documentary practices and types of realism and, spaces in the world, research-based practices as well. But then, then I guess the last project that I did, which was took me a long time, I guess, but I sort of re-embraced thinking about myself within my work and became sort of, it became a way to think in relation to the lens-based practice, but thinking about the lens also through the body. And so bringing a performance practice back into it after sort of leaving it for a while. So, yeah, I mean, I feel like I've kind of returned to thinking about performance and the body when, for like 10 years, I kind of was, focused on other types of learning and making.
Thanks. And Renée, you have quite an extensive engagement with the moving image as well. So maybe you could talk about that.
Sure. Okay, in terms of situating this work in relation to other works that I've made with moving image, this one is actually it's later than, I mean, it's an early work. This is an early work, but before this work, I had made other work. And this a massive work called Import Export Funk Office, and it was made in Los Angeles and in Cologne in Germany and in New York. And there were maybe 26 hours of footage that are a part of it. But one of the objectives in that film was to use the time-based medium as a way to record these conversations and not edit them. And to have them have like the durational element be a part of it. And that was something that could be situated also spatially in an installation that had many different components that were related to aspects of what we were discussing and all kinds of elements of that kind, as well as sound elements and photographic elements. And so that's something in structural elements and literally books and sculptural parts. But so in this one, I've been rethinking this work, and this is a nice opportunity to do it. I tried to make a list of all the parts of it because it's also a very massive piece, the whole piece. Although elements of it, and this one is an earlier part of it. So the import-export was 91, 93. Many times I'm working for several years on a work. And so this one was 96, 97. And what's, Partially Buried was the first part taking place in Ohio. But then in terms of connecting different of the elements that are related to what appears, for example, the father's interview, that segues into the next film, Partially Buried Continued, which was shot in Korea, in Seoul and in Gwangju. And that goes into 1980, massacre in Gwangju. The cemetery, the burial of the people there. That's why, when we talk about burial, it's the burial is still unfolding in the other aspects of the work, and so and that becomes a very prominent part of it, and what can't be found, and also what's reburied, literally reburied, moved. And so, so anyway, this work was shown in a retrospective with the many different elements, which were their photographic elements, sculptural ones. There's a set that's a kind of reconstruction of the Underground, the film by Emile de Antonio, and Haskell Wexler, Mary Lampson. There are all of these different aspects that are feeding into it. So this Partially Buried was one of 7 moving image parts of the work. And so it was presented on a monitor. And there were 5 monitors, and there were different other moving image works that were made, like other filmic parts that were made. And then there were 2 projected parts. One was Partially Buried Continued, and the other one was called Korea Slides. And those combined the slides of my father that he took when he was in the war, and the ones that I took when I was there in 1997 for the Gwangju Biennale. And I went twice to make the work. So yeah, the films have been shown. This has been shown like it's been interesting for me to work in a way where it's possible to have a screening in a cinema that's taken place also, showing this film along with other ones in that context, and also in the installation context. And so it's interesting, the differences that take place in them.
Yeah, thank you for that. And for viewers who are interested in watching Partially Buried Continued, it's actually screening right now as well, right, at the Artist Space Whitney program. So yeah, check that out. I believe it's online as well.
Yes, they have an online exhibition.
and your engagement,
so it's allowed. Yeah, it's
right
with that. Yeah.
So definitely, if viewers are interested, I encourage y'all to check that out as well. And if anyone has any Q&A questions as well, please drop them in the comments section. If you're on YouTube, you can do that. Just type it in. But I also wanted to bring up a few things. So we touched on Robert Smithson already in the work, and we touched on how you are both artists and have worked primarily in the kind of art world context, whatever that means, but also works that have been screened in cinema. So there's a lot of interplay between those. And I did want to just briefly touch on what could be an interesting topic, which is the way in which art history functions within these works and the kind of references that they bring to mind. Of course, Smithson being an artist directly, and Renee's mother also teaching sound-based art, or having sound-based engagements at Kent State at the same time. And for Patty, there's many references I think that viewers could draw. Andrew Wyeth's painting "Christina's World" comes to mind, but then also, of course, the land art movements of the 1970s, which Smithson was also a part of. Anna Mendieta also comes to mind, and so I'm thinking of how you all see what I consider like the kind of like specter of art history playing out in these works. I guess, Patty, feel free to go again if you want.
Okay, yeah, sure. I mean, I guess in thinking about the land and bodies, yeah, definitely Anna Mendieta comes to mind. And, I think one visual cue is for sure Andrew Wyeth's Christina's World. And the subject of the painting is believed to have this like neurological illness that caused damage to her peripheral nerves, causing like muscular loss, ataxia, which is like loss of coordination and weakness. So thinking about the body being in direct distress, lacking this sort of coordination with the land, rendering some kind of like spatial confusion between them. I'm not sure that exactly answers your question about art history, but I was sort of just thinking about the body within that particular art historical reference as well.
For sure, yeah, and I guess just in terms of like how that how that plays out, whether it's art historical or not, but the references that are drawn, and I'm interested in how those how artists kind of pay tribute in some ways to other artists. And Renee, maybe you have some thoughts on that as well. You engage with many artists over your career.
Yes, I like to be engaged with artists and speaking with them and thinking about what their words are. And so that's kind of generated my interest in, as I'm writing, I'm really interested also in other artists who are writing. And so that is something that Smithson was engaged in doing. And also Teresa Ha-Kyung Cha was a writer. And so that is one of the reasons why, actually in this film, I wanted to explore both. I wanted to think about the position, or actually just the action, really, of what's entailed when writing takes place. And when and so it was interesting, your question. I made some notes about it because I was thinking, I don't know, it's art history. It's actually history and art history is a part of history. And then it led me to think about how is it we come to know about anyone's work or anything of that kind. And so in the case of Teresa Ha-Kyung Cha, I came to the book. I didn't find any information on her when I tried at Museum of Modern Art at that time. that I was looking, there was a very, very thin file folder with a few pieces of paper, but there was nothing that informing about who or what it was that she was doing. And then Robert Smithson also was through writings. The book that was published probably, I guess, in 1979, Nancy Holt had edited it after he died, of his writings. And so that's something that I could read. And so that led to my interest in a different way. And then knowing that there's specific locations where he went, some of them overlapped with places that I too went, like in Mexico, for example, in Palenque, and different things I was interested that I could come into contact through words and images that he had put together, as well as the film. Spiral Jetty. So the writing and making films are also so interrelated, even though, you're always using images and sound and movement and time and space, yet writing is a very crucial element that is connecting all sorts of aspects of it. And that's part of what attracts me to this combination of being able to think with it and to transform it into something else.
Yeah, thank you. We were about to wrap up, but there's a few questions. We have a question from Eric Holmes Esmail, and the question brings up the question of labor, and I wonder if labor as a concept plays a role in these works, both in terms of the land-body relationships, but also performance and ritual acts. And yeah, I think the concept of the ritual, I think, is really interesting too. Renée, you touched on it a little bit, and Patty, in your work in general, there are lots of elements of ritualistic acts that you perform. So I was wondering if you might be able to talk about that, about labor, ritual, and yeah, performance.
Yeah, I mean, I do work with a lot of ritual in my performative work, and also just in my filmic work too. I think, like, using ritual as a way to structure a way to move through the world, and to then understand it through that ritual. I mean, there's so many things that I could think of. I mean, in the last works that I made, moving along an aqueduct in China, and then the ritual was every time we came to the aqueduct, I would pee, and so just sort of like thinking about the actions of the body, the labor of the body in relation to infrastructures that are sort of abstracted and beyond oneself, beyond the understanding of like the scale of a human person. And so I guess in that way, just even like in this piece, just trying to like move on water or balance on water and trying to stabilize, to attempt to come to a sort of like stabilization, but it sort of not really being able to, and just also thinking about I guess thinking about labor, in relation, like not only the human labor, but like when actions happen and how it draws in the space surrounding it, and there is some sort of like relational labor between them. I don't know, I'd like to think about that idea as well. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really great. I'm glad we could kind of connect that theme throughout your work too. So, Renée, do you have any thoughts on ritual, the aspect of ritual and labor?
Yeah, I mean, I think that in terms of ritual, that could actually relate to the ways that artists work. I mean, you could make a generalization about that because people are creating the way that they're able to form whatever it is, meaning that like how they're relating to time, how they're relating to space, what decisions they make, even if some of them might follow something that's inherited or that's studied in some way, or it can also be something that one's decided. Like, for example, like Onkawara, who I continue to be interested in, certain ways that there are personal rituals that are created in terms of a practice that one does. And so I would say that I'm interested in that, and I'm engaged in these ways of doing things. In terms of the labor aspect, I think that there's something that's linked to that as well. And there's also a kind of the mysterious aspect also that's not really known. It's sort of like that's one of the things that a ritualistic practice can open because you don't really know where it's going, but it's in a way meant to focus your attention focus your attention in some kind of way. And so that is connected to a form of labor, a form of energy that's being exerted. And so thinking about this question in relation to the film is sort of interesting for me because in different parts of it, labor is actually literally referred to. For example, the shed, finding the woodshed, what the students did, how they organized to be able to locate and do the work, the snowstorm, working through the snow and the cold to move the things. So much things were, and then the work of making the film itself involved tremendous amount of labor, physical movement, going to the places, moving through them, finding different things. So yeah, I think it's a worthwhile question to think about.
Yeah, and I would also just add that the moment where they talk about the $10,000 price tag being situated, right, and thinking about how that number even came to be in relationship to labor, and how capital and labor are in a very precarious and unstable relationship with each other, despite being fixed. With art, it is an arbitrary, at times, assessment. That could be an interesting way of also thinking about Patty's instability on the waterbed as well. I just wanted to say thank you again to both of you so much, and I love these works, and I'm so glad we could have these in conversation with each other, and then also have you both in conversation with each other. I would give the floor over to you if you have anything to promote that you would like our audience, if they're interested in your work, to seek out. Patty, do you have anything coming up?
I'm working on this piece, speaking of like labor and ritual. It's called Milk Debt, and it's a multi-channel work of women pumping their breast milk while they read people's lists of fears. And it's going to show at 18th Street Art Center in Santa Monica in October.
Great, we'll be on the lookout for that. And Renée, you have several shows up right now. Is there any one that you're particularly excited about?
Things coming up. I mean, in terms of labor, major labor went into a book that's going to be coming out. It's called Pacing. And that was with the Carpenter Center project that I did over 2 years. And that should come out in the spring. And then, exhibitions. I've got a retrospective coming up in Berlin, if it's possible to go there. But work is continuing there. Conditions are different. And so that's at KW and also at the DAAD. So that's scheduled for next summer. And then more immediately, I have a show that's opening at Bortolami on September 12th in New York. And again, if it's possible to actually go there, that will be great. So those are the most immediate things. And then next week at Chang's remote, doing something with Howie Chen and Alex Ito. And we're going to be talking about these new short films that I've made.
Yeah, definitely stay tuned for that. Chen's World, if you want to continue the conversation with Renee, there'll be more time for engagement with that platform. And just a reminder, at 7 o'clock, 7 o'clock Mountain Time, which is 9 o'clock Eastern Time if you're around, we have our continuing conversations with Flaherty x Boulder, Joanna Priestley, and Mary Filippo. Thank you all again. Thank you again to the Flaherty. Thank you to my co-programmers, Devin Noreen Singh and Alia Ayman, who is in Cairo right now. And thank you to Mimesis Documentary Festival. And thank you all for tuning in. I hope you have a great night and continue to watch these amazing films. So thank you all again and take care.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Good night.